Hey, is this the mass media classes? I know you haven't seen me in a while, but I wanted to come in very quickly today. We're going to not finish up the movie chapter yet. I just want to finish up the thread of videos that I had left. I kind of stopped when talking about Birth of a Nation. But there's a couple other things I wanted to go over first before I go ahead and finish up that video thread that I did send you. Of course, some news items that came up. Number one, the number one movie in America over this past weekend was the new Ghostbusters movie. Now, it made about $44 million at the box office, which I guess coming out of COVID would be a big deal, but I think if this was pre-COVID, for a movie with this magnitude, with as much publicity as this has gotten, I would say it kind of fell a tiny bit disappointed. Maybe not disappointed, but just not what I think it could have gotten. Especially, for example, when I talk about publicity, if you look at all the late night talk shows, when you start to see all these stars of movies show up. But what I think is interesting is the reason why I think and strongly feel that this $44 million that the new Ghostbusters movie made was kind of a disappointment is because, did you notice what the number one trending item is on Netflix right now? Yeah, it's Red Notice. The movie with The Rock, Ryan Reynolds, and of course, Gal Gadot. Now you've got three of the biggest movie stars out there starring in a movie on Netflix, and it blows up. Now, if this was in the theaters, how much would this would have done? Well, this goes back to what I've been talking about. I will talk about this till I'm blue in the face, because I'm still waiting for it to actually be real. I guess you could say it really is something now. I mean, but I've been talking about it for about 12, 14 years. It's the movie houses, whether it's Bow Tie or some other cinema company, making the deals with the movie studios that were keeping movies from coming directly to our homes. You would have to still run to a theater to go see these movies firsthand. Well, Netflix kind of started to change that with The Irishman, which came out in November of 2019, exactly 2 years ago, where it was in theaters for 3 weeks and then boom, went immediately to Netflix. And a lot of people like myself did just that. It's like, why am I going to go pay money for a babysitter where it costs me more for the babysitter than it does for the movie tickets? I can just wait 3 weeks. It comes on Netflix. My wife and I can watch it. All right. So now here you have Netflix releasing a movie like Red Notice, which, in my opinion, personally, pre-COVID, that movie makes $80 million at the box office over the weekend, at least. And they did a big publicity scene. Ryan Reynolds, Gal Gadot, Rock, Dwayne Johnson, they were on all different type of late night talk shows or other talk shows promoting this film. But the thing that's really got me noticed was also in the fact that here, my wife shows me the Walmart circular for this weekend. Look at this. Right there. That's a 70-inch 4K television for less than $550 at Walmart. And it's a Vizio. It's not like a name brand that nobody's ever heard of. No, that's a Vizio 4K 70-inch for less than $550. This is where I really feel we're going to see more and more of that movement post-COVID. It's like, I know right now, one of the things I think is a little crazy is that, on Amazon Prime, you can watch the new 007 movie, but it's going to cost you $20. Which, again, if it's just my wife and I, it might not be a bad idea, only because it's just the two of us, and if we were going to the movies to see it, we'd probably be paying $12 or $14 each. Plus, we'd be paying a lot more for popcorn. I mean, I'm getting boxes of Redenbacher popcorn at ShopRite, 2 boxes for $4, so I'm getting a lot of popcorn for $4 as compared to going to the movie theater. And if I have to go to the men's room, click, hit pause, and I get my own bathroom. Yeah. So I think that we're going to see more and more of this start to move towards what I thought was going to happen years ago, that the movie studios were making deals with the movie houses to prevent from doing. And that's having these, another one that opened up big or would have opened up big at the box office, but still had a lot of good promotion to it, and that's King Richard, the movie with the Fresh Prince, Will Smith. Will Smith playing Richard Williams, the father of Venus and Serena Williams. Big time movie. Opens up on HBO Max instead of being in theaters. This could be big because especially, I just think that Ghostbusters movie, if this was pre-COVID, should have done a lot better than what it did. And yet you have a couple other big films opening up directly to streaming, and a lot of people watch those films. A lot of people watch Red Notice. A lot of people did go to HBO Max and watch King Richard. What I want to talk a little bit about today before I get back to finishing up that movie thread that I sent you last time is I want to talk a little bit more about television. One of the things that I've been talking about lately, is live sports is pretty much it. And that, of course, the NFL still being something that people are actively watching on television. We had that sneak in there with the Paramount Network with Yellowstone. But those ratings have now come back down to normal. With, again, a big reason why is people know that if I miss it on the time that it airs, I can always watch it whenever I feel like it, which is, I think, one of the greatest things ever. I mean, you have to understand people not being able to watch something when you want to, but you had to watch it when they told you it was going to be out. It's a great world. It really is. But with the NFL football, one of the things that I wanted to show you was something that's only been a phenomenon for about 15 or 20 years at the most. And that is, of course, the most watched part of the NFL season is the playoffs. Okay? Now, again, you get a good game on Sunday night, like with Tom Brady a couple weeks ago where they pulled in 27 million people. You're going to get it. That's a great audience. But even during the day, they sometimes, during 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if like it's the Cowboys and let's say the 49ers at 4:25 on a Sunday afternoon, they can still pull in about 25 million people. But what they did, though, a couple years ago is finally recognize that we need to do something in prime time. One of the things I think is interesting is, you watch the Super Bowls, and I love watching Super Bowl highlight films, and you look at, say, Super Bowl 10, okay, excuse me, between the Cowboys, excuse me, clear my throat here, between the Cowboys and the Steelers. Now, Super Bowl 10, the Steelers won 21-17, they played in Miami. As you watch the end of the game, you notice it's still daylight. Well, that's because they started the game at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. By the time they got to Super Bowl 13, which again was a big hyped rematch between the Steelers and the Cowboys, you now see the game starts off in the daytime but ends in the dark of night. They now started to move the game a little later to where now the Super Bowl will typically kick off at 6:28 p.m. And that's, of course, to grab the prime time audience, the time when everybody is now starting to settle in. But the funny thing is that even with Super Bowl 13 starting to move closer to prime time, the NFL had not recognized that during the playoffs, they needed to move their time also. So for the longest time, on Saturday and Sunday when the playoffs would run, the first game would be at 1 o'clock, the second game would be at 4 o'clock. And that's just the way they did it. But about 15, 20 years ago, they started to change that. They started to realize that the primetime audience is something they really need. So now, when they start doing the playoffs, especially if it's like wild card weekend, on the Saturday night, they'll actually do a game at 5 and then one at 8:30. And then on the Sunday night, they'll start a game at like 2:30 and the next game at like 6. But get to it prime time as much as possible. And then, of course, when the regular playoffs come, it's pretty much the same thing. But you're going to start seeing this now as we get towards the end of the season, where the NFL is going to try and maximize as much as possible getting a primetime audience, which they've done. They've got a Sunday night game, a Monday night game, and a Thursday night game. And right now, with television being as whacked out as it is, with all the different streaming services, and it's not just streaming services, but it's streaming channels with their own original content. You know, Netflix is producing its own shows. Hulu is producing its own. Even Tubi now. Tubi is actually producing their own shows. So that when you look at like the NBC network or the CBS network or the Fox network, they need to compete somehow, and of course putting these sports into primetime is what's really keeping them alive. And you have Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night, and then when the playoffs come, they're going to put as many games into primetime as they can to maximize the amount of audience they can get. As a matter of fact, it was only about 3 or 4 years ago. I remember there was a playoff game, I think, featuring the Saints and Drew Brees, where they got like 35 or 40 million people. And this was just a wild card round or divisional round where they got 35 or 40 million people. And then, of course, when you get to the conference championship games, you're going to get about 55 million people for each of those games, with the Super Bowl, of course, then being the granddaddy of them all, where the average audience for the Super Bowl is about 100 to 105 million people. And what's interesting sometimes with the Super Bowl is you'll actually have 105 million people watching the game, 107 to 108 million watching the halftime show. And that's why whoever they pick as the halftime show, performing the halftime show is such a big deal, because it could mean major, major television ratings. So now let's go ahead. I wanted to finish up with the thread that I had. You know, you're now starting to see with these motion pictures or movies, people are flocking to the theaters, and there's all kinds of different stars that now start to arrive. Of course, I had put down from 1921 The Sheik with Rudolph Valentino, and this is where that first ever, the male suave gentleman, the heartthrob has come about. And of course, he was such a good-looking young guy. He put his face out there, and women just swooned. They would like melt in their seats. As a matter of fact, when he died suspiciously in 1926, there were and you Google this if you want to, there are hundreds of thousands of people at Rudolph Valentino's funeral in Times Square in New York in 1926. It is amazing how incredibly popular this movie star had become. And then, of course, physical comedy. Because it was still silent movies, physical comedy. But now they were silent, but what they used to do, and I saw a picture of this yesterday, somebody had posted a picture, a Facebook page that I'm a part of, is like, vintage Lyndhurst history. And there's an old Lyndhurst theater from like the 19-teens, and it shows the screen up in the front, and then right in front of the stage is a piano. Because what silent movies would do is the reel would come, the movie itself, and then sheet music. So you would play the piano to the movie, and of course the music would coincide with what was happening on the screen. So you see a lot of physical comedy. I gave you a movie with the great Harold Lloyd, just truly amazing. But then finally, it was in 1927, at the height of all the great popularity that there was with silent films, there was still something missing, and that was sound. And in 1927, we had The Jazz Singer with the late vaudeville comedian Al Jolson. And when people were walking into that theater and they could actually hear his voice as he's singing on the screen, it just changed the whole landscape. As a matter of fact, there's a great scene in a movie, The Aviator, with Leonardo DiCaprio. He plays Howard Hughes, and Howard Hughes was a rich oil guy who then wanted to get into Hollywood, into movies and everything else. And he shoots this movie. It takes him 2 years to shoot this movie about World War I and World War I, air battles and that kind of thing with the old planes. And after his movie's done, it takes him 2 years to shoot this film. He makes the company, his film company, reshoot it, because as he's got the opening of his film, he goes down the street, walks into a theater, sees Al Jolson, the jazz singer, says, no, we got to reshoot, we have to have sound. And he reshot his movie with sound, because that's where it was going. And that's where we're going to go, after we come back from the break, from Thanksgiving. I hope you all enjoyed Thanksgiving dinner with your families. And we'll close out the movies chapter. But I did want to talk about that at the beginning of this video, because I do really think that we're getting closer and closer to where you are just sitting at home and any first-run movie that comes out, will it still be in theaters? Yeah, but you'll still be able to watch it at home in the comfort of your own home, hopefully on a 70-inch Vizio that you only paid $550 for. All right, you guys, enjoy your holiday, and we'll see you probably on Monday or Tuesday.